Welcome to the Bright Insight podcast. This is a weekly show provided by Brightside Security Lab. We're talking about updates on security regulations, requirements, and perspectives on the current cybersecurity developments. Security is becoming more widely used and important at home, work, school, or in your personal life. Think about GDPR and the Cybersecurity Act. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. The more systems we secure, the more secure we all are. Thank you for listening to Bright Insight.
Hey, Christoph, welcome to our podcast. Nice having you here. Actually, it's kind of interesting, right? Because now I should be talking about my colleague, Christoph. Now we are colleague.
Thanks for having me for this session. So it's a very interesting turn on our personal relationship. It's still always working on the same topic, but changing the relationship from being a customer, being a competitor, and now being in the same company and a colleague is would say, very nice turn over the last years. And
I guess that's also an interesting reflection. We're just a big, happy family.
Let's see. But I'm looking forward to be.
Maybe a good idea for the audience. Maybe you can introduce SGS. What about that? And now I just realized, normally on the podcast, I start by asking our guests to introduce themselves. And I haven't done that with you. So
so the last part of my story you now already know. I am with SGS since 2.5 years. So I was really the first employee here in SGS Digital Trust Services in Graz. And I was there from the total beginning, more or less, of the security services for products, more or less. My background is I've 20 years or roughly 20 years, probably already a bit more, in security, mainly in hardware security and implementation security. Right now I'm managing the lab in Graz, so I'm heading locally all services, all people here in Graz. So we are roughly 30 people.
Now, what you say there about having this dialogue between the lab and the vendor is important because we need to have this exchange of ideas. We need to have this harmonization of views. And somehow this reflects on what we have been looking at this podcast series. That gives us the opportunity to have a conversation with vendors and to have their point of views. We have a number of very interesting people in the podcast in the past few months. I guess you hear or you listen to a couple of them, right?
Yes, exactly. And I re-listened to some of them yesterday evening, just to remember kind of some of the core points the people were talking about. And it's really a really nice summary about all the topics you have there and all ideas and concerns also, because I completely understand the vendors, and it strongly depends for the vendor on which level of the ecosystem he is, because looking into the semiconductor providers, say they are on the lowest level in the supply chain for a final product, and consumers care about the security of the final product. So if you have a very scattered certification landscape, then it's incredibly difficult for the vendors on the, say, lowest levels of the supply chain, because they need to fulfill all standards, all certifications, which is a huge effort. So we need to listen to them, and we also need to find a way on stacking certifications, each on top of another one, to make it easier for those who are on the bottom of the supply chain, and also easy for those who are on the top of the supply chain, those which are providing the service on top, because they want to base their service on certifications done underneath, because they can also not certify the whole thing together They don't have control of the hardware, of the software, of the operating system. They just offer a service based on all these things, and they need to establish a trust level, and certification is a very nice tool of establishing trust to the components you're using.
But on this first series of our podcast, we talk a lot with silicon vendors, but I guess there is what you say. That's the reason why we do it, because we have a common agreement that the silicon, the semiconductors, is the cornerstone of trust, is the foundation of trust. And for example, we have Anand, he's product marketing manager from Microchip, and he was elaborating about the fact that those core components, the MCUs, they are at the core of many of the devices, and they are used in multiple applications.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also looking into the list of people you talk to, you have a really nice portfolio of different suppliers coming from a very different angle. And I think also the maturity level the semiconductor suppliers have reached is quite high. If you look into the last years into the amount of hacks published or wherever you're looking into, it's increasing, and we are flooding the market and the world with connected devices. I think this is the big game changer, is that today nearly every device has somehow a connection. Yeah, before we had also a lot of electronic devices, but they were not interconnected. But now, kind of, we are really entering this IoT world. It's things being connected, and it's not only the classic consumer IoT products, but you can consider everything as connected things. And you have the cars which are connected, and we had a lot of hacks in this area on connected cars. Everybody is aware of those hacks. We are talking about connected medical devices. We have hacks on pacemakers, on other medical devices. So we're, would say, still a step behind with building a useful framework, because we already put so many connected devices into the markets, and it's extremely hard to get control of whatever is out there, because it's also a matter of, even if you could update them with firmware updates, secure them, it's hard. Who is doing it? Who is responsible for updating devices which are in the market? So who even is the owner, and who is responsible for an update?
Right. It's a fact that this is a trend that we cannot ignore. Everything is connected. Everything is going to be connected, and in the future is going to be even more. So today we're talking about Internet of Things, but we are already talking about Internet of Senses, right? So there will be so much connectivity in all the things we use on day-to-day basis, enhancing our senses, etc. So that's a trend that we can ignore. And I like it. For example, one of the comments I hear in our podcast that I enjoyed very much was the comment from Mike Dunn from Silicon Labs, where he was looking into his crystal ball, and he let us look into that ball, but by saying that he needs to work, or as a silicon vendor, he needs to work in silicon that is going to be in a product probably a few years down the line in the market, but he needs to understand there is a trend, there are particular needs, and he needs to prepare the silicon to address those particular needs that, again, maybe in 4 or 5 years are going to be mandatory. You were talking, for example, the automotive. Now we're talking about so many things about the need of the automotive, but the fact is that today no many requirements for security in the automotive market are mandatory, but that's going to change in the future, right? So we see the need, we see the trend.
Exactly, and not probably it's not even only a topic of regulations and being mandatory, but it's also, if you design today a chip which should go in somewhere in automotive, then the chip will be probably in the car in 5 years, because until the car is finally designed, blah, 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 and all this stuff. So you have 5 years, and then we have cars driving around which are 20 years old. So you need to plan in security now for 25 years plus. And go back in your memories 25 years in the past. I mean, we were not talking about connectivity. We were not talking about cybersecurity issues 25 years in the past. What will we have in 25 years in the future? And we should consider today security, at least for on a longer term, because those things will be operational in 20 years or things like this. It's not like your bank card, which you anyway exchange every year or every 2 years or whatever. And probably if you look into a bank card product, it's in the market for 5 to 10 years probably. But still, compared to 25 years, it's a very short period of time and a very controlled thing, because your bank can always decide to disable all bank cards and say you need to get a new one that it's operational. But and the cost for exchanging the bank card per consumer is not that high. But somebody telling you need to throw away your 1,000 euro smartphone is already more difficult, because you still want to use it. And now if somebody comes and tells you need to throw away your 30K car because it has a security issue you cannot fix, nobody will do any longer. So,
yeah, and you were saying that it's true, and I guess that's the example of the payments a good example. So on one hand, we're talking about there may be regulations, there will be enforcement mechanisms, but that's not the only way that the industry will evolve. I mean, the need for security is everywhere. I think it was John, when we were talking to John Boogie from NXP about the state of the market in security certifications and evaluations. But in one hand, of course, again, it's this mandatory nature of regulations, but that's not everything. The market is looking into evidence of security for managing the risk. I hear some interesting stories in the automotive where the insurance companies are actually driving those security requirements because of this risk management. And of course, many of the vendors who are looking ahead in the long term, they see security as a key element for market differentiator, and that will be a clear cut in the market between products that are secure or perceived as secure versus the others who are not there.
Yeah. Exactly. So I see it also, it's on the one hand, it's a clear differentiator, but it's becoming also more and more a concern of the consumers. I think it needs to become more and more a concern of the consumers. And you already mentioned it, the insurances in the car industry or in the automotive area, but also look into insurances for your house. We're more and more going to home automation, electronic door locks, whatever. You can do everything from your mobile in your home. And I had discussion also with a friend of mine working in insurance, and said kind of, okay, what happens if somebody breaks into my house and I cannot show evidence that somebody broke in? And then he said, yeah, you then have a big issue. Because you cannot prove that somebody broke in, things are stolen, but you have an issue with your insurance. So if you look into electronic locks, opening doors, opening windows, whatever, you have also an issue there. So it's really a concern. It needs to be a concern of consumers, and I think for some markets, the change needs to be driven also by the consumers. It's nice to have a market differentiator for a vendor, but this differentiator only helps you if the consumers of your goods are valuing your differentiator. If they don't care about security, then you have no market for your product. Even if you have the better product, the more secure product, but if nobody's paying for it or nobody looking into it, then you still have an issue. And I think we also need to have there more public education for also end consumers. It's not only end consumers, it's also in the business to business consumer part. Still, if security is not mandated or not in everybody's mind, you still have issues there, because most probably you are a bit more expensive if in your solution if you have security included. It's not always the case, but sometimes it's the case. It's clear security is not coming for free. It's nothing you get for free. So you need to spend expertise. You need to spend, if you go into the semiconductor, you need to spend area for implementing security. It's not there without any cost. So, but I see it the same way as John sees it. It can be a big differentiator. Some already understood this. Some are on the way to understand it. And for some companies, I still have the feeling that security is still a burden.
I think it was Ilya Stalo from Wimbledon, who was looking that he also points us in the direction that we need to look into the specific needs in the entire value chain. You already spoke about the need from the consumer or the user, and again, the end user could be in the B2B and enterprise, could be in the B2C, an end user, a consumer. But the fact is we need to look into the entire value chain. So, for example, Ilya was talking about how the perception of security and the value of security may have a different interpretation for a system integrator as it can be for a service provider. So the point here isn't that, first of all, security has value, and like any value needs to be cascaded in the value chain. But one thing we need to be careful is we need to understand that different players in this value chain, and again, all the way from the silicon to the end user, being the enterprise of the consumer, they may see security or the security needs may be different. We're talking about service providers, for example. Now, some companies are already offering smart homes as part of their telco packages. So you get the internet, but you can also get different smart devices connected to your house. And it's no surprise that as part of the service offering, they do also the management. You were asking about the patching of the software, updating, etc. But at some time, they're also taking a risk. And I think that's important. We need to start recognizing who are the risk owners and what risks they're taking. And again, understanding what are the specific needs, because we cannot have a clear cut. Different parties can be looking to their needs in a different way. It may be that service provider may be looking into compliance. Could be, I don't know, think on industrial applications. But maybe the system integrator is going to be looking at risk management. So their approach is different. But the fact of the need for security is evident across all the value chain, like Ilya was saying.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ilya there. So we need to look in every single part, and it's all about risk management. And up to now, in security certification, it was mainly an act of certifying a device, like in common criteria. And so there I liked the approach in the banking sector with EMICO, which have the same technical requirements than in the common criteria for our smart card domain. But on top, they add their risk management because they are also the service providers. So they cope already with this risk management part. They look into having a very strong platform, but they also do the risk management part there. And they are in this lucky situation on doing both things, because in most other value chains, I would say it's much more complex than in the bank card sector, where it's only a few players, and they are in full control of the whole ecosystem, which is the same more or less in the mobile phone market. So the vendors are controlling a big part of the ecosystem, but for a lot of other devices which we use today, we are in a completely different situation still. And there we need to look very carefully on kind of the full value chain and the full certification or whatever you use then a chain, and to have the right view for every level, the right detail level on all these different supply chain levels, because if you're looking with the wrong level of detail on the wrong level, then either it's insufficient what you're doing, or it's too costly or too expensive. So we need to look there, or have there very careful look into how to set up this overall ecosystem. And what is the important thing at the end is the risk of the service or the application at the end. So what are we protecting against? And this is, and you know this probably also from a lot of discussion in working groups, in committees, in wherever you discuss this, for a single product, it's very hard to name the risk as long as you don't know the application. And even if you assume this is the application, somebody can use it for something completely different. And we know this out of history also, and where you had hacks on semiconductors which were made for identification of a device or whatever. So very simple RFID stuff, which was never made for security, but because it was there, a system integrator took it for payment because you could use it. It was never designed for, but you can use it for it. And so you have used it for a completely wrong application, and then for sure you had a huge security issue because it was never designed for.
Well, in the other hand, another thing we see is the market is moving to a completely different speed. Things are moving really fast in terms of development, deployment, etc. And many of the traditional models for building trust need to adapt to that circumstance. For example, we are that party that enable trust, right? So a third-party evaluation laboratory really simplifies the trust enablement between other parties. Hey, I have a product that is secure. You can trust me, or I have evidence from this other party, a trusted third party, that says that yes, it's indeed secure. You can trust me. But this trust chain is also evolving, because now we're talking about certification. The certification bodies are the enablers from the labs, right? So how can you trust this lab? Well, because there is somebody who can vouch for them. So you see, we go one level up. And it was Walter Slager from Trust CB who was addressing that need, that although we have a good base, if we take into account everything we have done in the past in the area of security, at the same time there is also a need to evolve, and we need to work on different speeds.
Yeah, exactly. So this is also, I think, and Walter, I think, addressed exactly this. In the past, evaluation certification was most of the time a lengthy process. You always looked into one product, and it was exactly this product. It was, if you had a small change in the product, you need to do most of the thing again. So we need to adapt the processes there, and we need to create a much huger bandwidth than which was there in the future. And
we need to make it scalable.
We need to make it scalable. And this is, I think, and as we saw this, or we see this as persons, but this is also the reason why these big tech companies are going into this market, because they are used to scale. They always scaled. They whatever they do, look into the CE branding for whatever electric device you have. They are used into mass marketing, very fast changing products with spot checking, with in the field checking, and creating bandwidth, because the more demand there is, the more bandwidth they create. And up to now, security certification was more or less something governmental driven, with certification body always being a governmental organization. They adapted a lot in the past, but they are not business driven. And I think we need to bring this, and this is what the big tech players are bringing to the cybersecurity topic, is they are business driven. They can, based on the business, create bandwidth. They will look into optimizing processes, because otherwise they cannot cope with. And it's nice that we are thinking about regulations, but regulations only make sense if you have somebody who can control them. So it would be like I can make a law on driving speed, but if I don't have somebody checking it, then it's useless.
Or even worse, if somebody thinks that it's voluntary. And
yes.
Yeah, I want to see somebody who adapts to the law just because it's voluntary.
Yes, this is something. This is also the discussion I see always in the market. I don't think that things will happen if they are voluntary.
No.
Nobody has, I don't see any company has to give away money for free, and doing something voluntary would be like giving away money for free. So.
No, I think there are interesting times ahead of us with all the regulations which are evolving. I guess policymakers are also trying to find their way how they can not just deploy regulations, also implement enforcement and also incentives for adopting those regulations. But in the back of all this, the industry keeps moving. We have a clear trend to digitalization, and that is just going to increase, which is going to make life very interesting in the years to come.
Yes, so everywhere, wherever you look, it's digitalization is the big topic. Being in the automotive industry, being in industry as general, so even in food production, everywhere digitalization is a huge topic. It's a topic for farmers. And there, mostly or very often, it's a topic about sensors, about measuring things, because it's, I think, very convenient to have distributed sensors. And this is how we started with the IoT topic, having a sensor network, distributed self-communicating sensor networks and things like this. So.
Yeah, we didn't have the chance to talk about artificial intelligence. But okay, anyway, that's moving for the next one.
Yes, exactly. This is a own topic, a topic in its own, but it's tackling security as well. So
yes,
but I think this is a nice topic for another podcast on artificial intelligence and how it is connected to security.
And security, yes, I agree with you. Thanks, Christoph. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
On this last episode from season number 1. Thank you very much to all the audience and to the participants on the previous podcast. And we are looking forward to talk to you again after the summer. Have a good holidays.
Thank you for listening to Bright Insight. In the next episodes, we will cover different topics, such as the EU Cybersecurity Act, the business case of security evaluations, common criteria, SASIP, IoT, and software-based security. Stay tuned and subscribe on brightside.com.